Hey everybody, it's Austin Ward for Lettermen Row. Got my buddies here, Tim May and Jeremy Birmingham over here. We're in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Ohio State scrimmage today. We did not get to watch it, so we didn't have a lot of observations that we get to personally make. The first half hour or so was open. We saw some things, Tim. So I'll just start with you. What did you learn from our brief viewing period and then Ryan Day's subsequent briefing with us about what happened on the field?
You know, one of the bad things about these viewing periods is you have people come up and start having conversations with you. So, you know, you're trying to like be incognito and just sort of like watch. And that's one of my challenges. But sometimes you learn something from the conversations for future use, et cetera. But what I learned is I think when the first team offense rolled out there for the first couple of plays of the scrimmage, I do believe you had Josh Allaby at left tackle, Jonah Jackson at left guard, Josh Myers at center, Wyatt Davis at right guard, and Brandon Bowen at right tackle. So that to me is an indicator, at least a week into camp, sort of where things stand on the offensive line. Of course, Thayer Munford is, as Ryan Day indicated to us after the scrimmage, I mean, they're bringing him along slowly. He's on a pitch count, a play count, et cetera. They don't want to jeopardize him, and we know Austin Mack is being held out for an undisclosed injury, but they expect him back. But that's the thing that stood out to me is like a week into camp, that's sort of your starting offensive line, and they can definitely make butter with that.
It's interesting that because we only have that certain period where we get to make way too much out of half an hour. I mean, Thayer Munford was getting a little medical attention. Looked, I don't know if it was a cramp, if it was more hip injury, whatever it was.
I mean, that hitch in his get along.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he dealt with last year that had the surgery. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to make too big a deal out of it, but I think that's one reason why you see Josh Allaby getting a lot of first-team reps throughout this camp is just in case something with Thayer Munford is not correct. And there's been no indication from Ryan Day that he's anything other than 100%. But it's just sometimes you see that stuff and try and put the pieces together for what that might mean. Again, it's just one week of camp.
We'd be able to put pieces together a lot better if we could watch the whole thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like putting a jigsaw puzzle together with only 6 pieces.
It makes it much harder.
I think that's why Greg Studrar on Thursday was so excited about the depth of the offensive line that they haven't had in the last few years, because finally, for once in his time here, if there is an injury, it doesn't seem like it's the end of the world on the offensive line, because Josh Allaby was able to play last year and prove that he could fill in admirably. So I think that's kind of a weight off the shoulders that they can actually slowly bring along. Thayer Munford is an incredible change from what we would have been dealing with a year ago.
And that also includes
confirmation and affirmation of what we've been talking about, you know, since the spring, is that the depth on the offensive line is much better than it's been in maybe a decade here.
And you're talking, you mentioned Bowen there being with the first string there, Tim, and do not rule out Nicholas Petit-Friere at that right tackle. That battle is ongoing, and this has been the first time, or maybe the most clearly, that Ryan Day has said he would consider rotating guys at tackle. I still am in the camp that until I see it, I won't believe it, because that's just, you want that chemistry on the offensive line. It's hard to believe that they would want to tinker at tackle, but maybe that happens.
Yeah, but think about the end of the year last year, like my man Bermanology was talking about a while ago. I mean, Demetrius Knox is hurt in the last minute against Michigan. What he was doing in there, who knows? You know, maybe they wanted to put another TD up there, but you know, bottom line is Wyatt Davis comes along, Josh Allaby comes along, replaces Thayer Munford, and starts the Rose Bowl. Yeah. That's what you have to have on a big-time team. And you think chemistry matters, but those guys played really well in big-time games, the Big Ten championship game and the Rose Bowl. And, you know, I think the NFL, the chemistry of the offensive line is a bigger deal. I'm talking about having just 5 guys, you know, the 5 hogs, right, as opposed to college football where there are a lot of times when you have a big-time program like Ohio State, you've got 7 or 8, 9 guys who deserve to play probably, and play them. And number 2, it keeps the other guys fresh. And, you know, they will settle in on a number 1 line. Mm-hmm. Every team does. When, you know, push comes to shove, you want your studs in there. But I think that's a good thing to play a bunch of guys.
All right, Birm, that's the offensive line there. Tim's got it covered for us. You had another observation, I'm sure. Where would you want to start?
I mean, I think it's the running backs. Again, Ryan Day in his post-scrimmage press conference said they still haven't found a backup running back, and some of that may be because Master Teague is on the sideline, again, with an undisclosed injury, because we're not talking about injuries this year. So we don't know how long that's going to keep him out. But again, it's another opportunity, I think, that DeMario McCall and Marcus Crowley and Steele Chambers all had today to sort of elevate themselves and separate themselves. And according to Ryan Day, that didn't happen. Now, according to Ryan Day, that didn't happen at quarterback either. It didn't happen anywhere. He seems to think that the offense was struggling today. But I think that's expected when you're talking about basically 3 new starting wide receivers, 4 new full-time offensive linemen, a full-time running back change, a brand new quarterback room. If you're expecting the Buckeye offense of 2018 to be what you see in the next 2 months, I would, suggest tempering the expectations just a skosh.
Well, and I asked that question to Ryan Day because you touched on it there. There were a number of turnovers that got his attention, a couple pick sixes, some ball security issues that must have been, he didn't specifically say it with the running backs, but that's probably why they're having this conversation that the number 2 hasn't stepped up. Well, how do you decide in a scrimmage where you're playing against yourself? Is that a negative for the execution of the offense or a positive for the defense on the other side? And he wanted to give some credit to both, but I think that at this point, Tim and Birm kind of alluded to it here, the defense is well ahead of the offense, and that's probably going to stay that way because I happen to think this defense can be pretty good.
Well, see, that's the beauty. I told Ryan Day after the press conference, that's the beauty of being the head coach is you get the glory in whatever side of the ball did well, and then go in and kick butt on the other side. Whereas last year, if they had problems on the offensive side, well, not in preseason camp, obviously, he was the head coach, but, it'd be Urban Meyer who would be kicking your butt. So, but yeah, I mean, this is interesting because my biggest question mark on this football team, they're going to have a quality offense, I do believe, down the road. Mm-hmm. Defense can't be much worse than it was last year in certain situations, and this you can see that Ryan Day is buoyed by what he has seen from the defensive side because we've asked him about it every time. Yeah. I've asked him about it almost every time just because that to me is a curious thing because that was not a quote an Ohio State defense last year. Yeah. Of course, that wasn't an Alabama defense in the national championship game either. They hope. It's
a defense that returns 8 starters. Yeah. So it's not like there's been wholesale changes to personnel. Right. It is all about the mental side of the game. And I'm telling you, if you talk to the players out here after practice the last few days, there's just this different energy. And it's not I know that sounds cliche or whatever, but these guys have they're like lighter in their steps. They're just walking around. They feel much more, I think, confident in what they're doing, and that is so key for defense.
But they haven't played anybody except themselves yet, and but just talking about that, I mean, Kayvon Pope had one of the pick sixes today. A linebacker we've hardly talked about. Seven Banks had another one. A defensive back we've hardly talked about. A pick six. I mean, those are big time plays, as Ryan Day pointed out, and but every practice it seems like the other day there were 4 interceptions in it. Josh Proctor had 2 of them. I mean, this defense is making some plays. That's even leaking out, from the powers that be. But that's what I wanted to say. Kayvon Pope 3 times because I haven't said his name very much.
I don't think any of us have, and that's a guy that
and the other guy, Baron Browning. Yep. I mean, that's the guy he talked about today.
I wonder. Kayvon Pope, you can see. I think Birm a little bit more. I don't know, possibility for him to play. I struggle. Get asked about Baron Browning a lot. Should he move? Can he be a pass rusher? Should he play on the outside? He doesn't feel comfortable at middle. It's hard for me to find the right place for Baron Browning, but it's a little bit easier with Kayvon Pope. You know what he's going to do with that athleticism, and clearly that must have flashed today in the scrimmage.
Baron Browning's an interesting case to me as a recruiting guy, okay? Because here he is, 5-star prospect, one of the top 10 players in the country coming out of Kennedale High School in Texas in 2017. But he played safety in high school, okay? Like, he was just a guy who happened to be a 6'4", 240-pound safety.
He was Sam Hubbard in high school.
He was the guy that their coaches said, go back there and stop everyone from getting behind you.
Right.
And there's that moment as a recruit when I think you have an obligation to yourself and your future team to go to your coach and say, I need to learn how to play my position because I don't know what I'm doing as a linebacker if I'm playing safety in high school. And so it's taken a couple years for Baron Browning to get there, but the athleticism is different. He's a different level of guy athletically, but that doesn't mean he knows how to play football. And that takes time to learn.
You know what that coach probably said to him? Son, you don't sign my paychecks. Ohio State doesn't sign my paychecks.
That is the catch-22.
Signs my paychecks.
That's the catch-22, isn't it? I mean, you find a ton of times quarterbacks in high school who aren't going to play quarterback, and they're like, well, you're not helping me develop. Cameron Martinez in the class of 2020 is a prime example of that. He's playing quarterback up at Muskegon, but he's going to be a defensive back or a wide receiver. Is he being helped by playing quarterback? And his coach knows he's not, so he's moving him.
But it's sort of like a long stem rose that's still a bud. You know it's going to be a rose when how nice of a rose remains to be seen. But the guy clearly has ability. I'm talking about Baron Browning, and in this day and age of run, I'm talking about talking about speed of the game, not the actual run down your throat kind of football. They're going to find a place for him. He just got that sense, and the thing that they're even talking about him to me says a lot. But that kind of goes with all these positions that we're almost talking about. There's a wealth of talent on this team. Some of it's not proven championship talent, but there's a wealth of it. You agree?
It's still one of the 3 or 4 most talented rosters in the country with Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson. And this is still, and I know that you can say what you want about recruiting rankings, but if you look at the blue chip ratio, right, which is how many 4 or 5 star players, this is one of the top 3 programs in the country, and it's never.
I believe it's number 1.
Yeah, so it may be at this point. Alabama has an extra 40 players on this roster or whatever, but the reality is a guy like Baron Browning committed to Luke Fickell, came in and played for Billy Davis, and now has a new linebacker coach. There's been so much that's happened staff-wise in Ohio State in the last few years that it's hard to blame a lot of these guys when they are going one way one day and another the next, because the program has been doing that. There's been so much turnover in the staff that I don't know how you find consistency and continuity on these guys in the playmaking.
This isn't like the old days, man, where Dick Butkus played middle linebacker in high school and went all the way through. You know what I mean? You recruit guys a lot of times just on their talent. What their raw ability shows them. Some of them have a chance to bloom earlier than others. Some of them actually bloom earlier than others, and then others take a while. And like I was talking with Josh Myers the other day, and the thing that gets me about this team is there's a lot of rising talent on this team that people haven't seen yet. I call it embedded talent, like him, like Josh Myers, like Wyatt Davis. Holy smokes, but like Baron Browning, guys that could really just come on this year and turn this into a big-time championship-type team. And that's the difference between an Ohio State and like an Indiana or Purdue or something. There's a lot of seeds in the ground.
Yeah, one of those guys for me, I wrote about him yesterday or the day before with Buckeye Q, was Jayshon Cornell.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you don't have a Nick Bosa who's going to start from day one. But you were telling me, Birm, I think at one point he was the number 1 overall recruit in the country. Maybe didn't stay that way or finish that way, but this is the kind of talent that is just like laying around in the Woody. You're like, oh, you know what? This guy was one of the best recruits in the country, and he didn't work out at defensive end, but we're going to use his pass rushing ability, and he might very well be the starter at that 3 technique spot when they play on August 31st. So look out for that. Before we wrap up, we can't help. We have to talk about the quarterbacks.
Oh, they were going to talk about the kickers.
Oh, yeah, we could have. But maybe next time we'll save it for later. Birm did write about the specialist today at Lettermen Row, by the way. I asked Ryan Day if he's any closer to having that guy earn a spot. He had said at Big Ten Media Days a week or 2 is when he wanted a name. Well, 1 week is in the books. Did not name, said the scrimmage didn't help him. We know how this is going to work out, I believe. But Justin Fields has still not been able to, I guess, take that job by the throat.
Yeah, all you can do is take the coach's word for it, right? The head coach is the guy who decides who the starting quarterback is. Don't let anybody else ever fool you about that one. But I don't know if that's good or bad. Because like we've talked about, Justin Fields has been here for 8 months. Gunnar Hoke has been here for a month and a half. Chris Chugunov has been here for basically a year. Yep. But they're letting them play it out. That's the fair way to do it. It also keeps people, for another term, happy. Yeah. But he said the 1s went for 40 plays, the 2s went for 40 plays, and the 3s went for like 30 or so. He didn't tell us who the 1's quarterback was, where they interchanged him or not. But that to me is an interesting situation because Justin Fields does look the part, but Gunnar Hoke, man, has got a lot of miles on him from the standpoint of experience. Of kind of like paying his dues, et cetera. And I don't think he's just going to lay down. Yeah. So I'm very interested to see how that goes.
And one of the things we've seen when we've been in practice, Justin Fields is not taking reps with the 2s, okay? He's just not.
Right.
So we can read all the tea leaves into that, whatever. He is the most talented quarterback on this roster, but as Tim said, there is an experienced guy there to back up. But I don't know if Tim raised a good point. Are you concerned or not concerned that they don't have an answer, a definitive answer at this point?
I'm not concerned because we know the definitive answer.
Okay.
But the point is, one thing that's really underrated about Dwayne Haskins a year ago is that he did not turn the football over. And if that is something that Ryan Day brought up on Thursday as far as a problem, again on Saturday as far as a problem, Justin Fields, if you watched him at Georgia a year ago, was not a guy who made turnovers in his limited time there. Yeah. If you watch him in high school, he's not a guy who turned the ball over. I don't know if he's pressing a little bit or trying to get timing right with a group of receivers that's brand new or any of that stuff. But if they're turning the ball over, then, yeah, you have a question. And you say, hey, are you the right guy if you can't keep the ball with our offense? So if that's the question, there's no doubt that Justin Fields is going to be the starter for Ohio State on day one. So now, whether or not these issues, if they're his, we don't know, because again, we don't get to watch. It could have been Gunnar Hoke throwing the interceptions or Chris Jugganoff. Now, if these issues carry over to the game one or game two, all of a sudden it's halftime against Cincinnati in week 2 of the season, and it's 17-14, and the Buckeyes have turned the ball over 4 times, maybe there's a problem.
Boy, that would be quite a score if they turn it over 4 times and still lead.
Houston, we have a problem.
For now, I think that is constructive criticism. I think it's, the carrot or the stick approach. And I think putting it out there and saying, hey, you haven't earned this is the right way to go.
Hey, I always take the head coach's word for what he's saying. I mean, why? I'm trying to figure out what his motivation would be for stringing this out, other than keeping people happy. Well, these guys, nobody here is going anywhere.
Yeah, they can't go anywhere.
So, I think it's legit that he wants to keep that competition going. He don't want to stop anybody resting, so to speak, on their laurels or their rankings. But like you said,
it's clear they haven't seen what they want to see yet.
Like you said, Justin Fields is taking the snaps with the first team every time we've seen them. What that means, who knows?
All right. So we're going to have to stay tuned for another week for that. I believe we will be back on Wednesday for our next availability. We'll see if Ryan Day has an update there on Justin Fields, Baron Browning, anybody else we talked about as training camp rolls along at Ohio State. That's Jeremy Birmingham. This is Tim May. I'm Austin Ward for Lettermen Row. We'll see you next time.